So you were talking about two different kind of little challenges that you're thinking about these days. Could you repeat those?
Yeah, so the first one is as a self-employed musician doing pretty much a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's no sense of consistency or routine
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. Every day is completely different and it might even change that day, which is
Right.
fine. I like going with the ebb and flow. But I think some routine in my life somewhere would be nice. And so I decided to come up with one in the mornings.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy mornings. I just have trouble getting out of bed. But once I get out of bed, I enjoy them. And it's kind of my time. I never have anything going on. And it's kind of my time to either catch up on things or, yeah, just enjoy
Mm-hmm.
the morning, start practicing more. And because I'm
Yeah.
always most productive in the mornings as well.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So establishing some kind of routine, and the other thing was about, you said, quality over quantity in terms of gigs and
Oh,
playing.
yes. Um, I want to have more of a mindset this year of quality over quantity. There's a couple things that kind of made me think this. The first was last year. It was kind of the, the quote unquote start of my music career,
Mm.
since that was my first full year out of college and
Mm-hmm.
things are opening up. So I would take every gig that
Yeah.
I could, pretty much. Um, and I would find at times leading up to the gig, I would get stressed about either having to learn the stack of music fast enough
Mm-hmm.
or not having time to really fully prepare or feel confident going
Yeah.
into the first
Yeah.
rehearsal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once I was there, it was always fine, and I always really enjoyed it in the moment. It was
Yeah.
always the moments
Yeah.
leading up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other thing is reflecting back to when this pandemic first started and there wasn't much going on at all. I would still play some gigs with a local orchestra we would record. And since I had so much free time, I never felt more confident in the music I was
Mm-hmm.
learning.
Mm-hmm.
I know throughout high school and a little bit in college, I would there'd always be some part of the music that I'd have to flub a little bit
Mm-hmm.
or kind of like
Mm-hmm.
fake my way through it. But this
I've
was
never
kind of
done
the
that.
start. Yeah, this was
No,
kind of
no.
the start. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could play the whole thing, and it
Hmm.
felt so good, so rewarding.
Yeah,
And I started to lose that as this year went on,
yeah,
because I didn't have the time to prepare it.
yeah. Okay, so it sounds like these two things are kind of related around. I don't like using this term, time management.
Hmm.
This has such a dreary quality to it. That term.
What's a better word for that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe that'll come up.
Yeah.
So maybe let's start with the first one. So establishing a routine. Um, yeah. So what's the challenge around establishing a routine? What makes that challenging for you?
Well, since I want it in the morning, because that's pretty much the only um, time I consistently have open in my schedule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The hardest part for me would just be waking up or getting out of
Mm,
bed.
mm,
Um, I am even noticing the past couple of days, I'll hear my alarm like, no, 10 minutes. Like my immediate reaction to it is no, I want to go back
yeah,
to sleep. I don't want to
yeah,
get out. But then when I do get out of bed, I feel great. It's just
mm,
getting out of bed. It's the
hmm,
tricky spot.
yeah. So in our culture, there's a bias towards using willpower to overcome our problems, and like the person who works 12 hours a day, or does a 60-hour work week, or has tireless does things tirelessly, never sleeps, never rests. This is sort of the ideal. It's changing a bit, but this has been the ideal for our culture for a long time now. Kind of a Puritan work ethic. And things like rest and play are looked down upon. Um, and yet, rest and play are also super important. Part of being a person or just like an earthling. Rest and play are essential to life. And, if you don't get enough rest, then your work is not going to be so great, that kind of thing. But also, like, what if that voice that says, no, I don't want to get out of bed? What if there's wisdom in that? What would be the wisdom if there was wisdom in that for you?
That my body needs more rest than I think it does.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think about that?
I think so. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I realize that is what it needs. So I will, and if I'll go back to sleep and wake up later, and I'll feel better. But also, well, yeah, there's kind of a fine line between getting more rest and feeling better, and sleeping more and feeling tired for the rest, like oversleeping in a
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the oversleeping can happen when your your circadian rhythms get off. Or, yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's kind of part of the reason why I want to
yeah,
get into a. It doesn't have to be on the dot. Wake up at
yeah,
this, go to bed at this time,
yeah.
but at least
Yeah.
have a little bit more consistent of a sleeping schedule.
Yeah, I mean that's super important. Part of what makes your energy like lets you have enough energy at certain times and lets you get sleepy at other times is simply that having that consistency. Um, and I guess the two things that come up for me around that are uh, like being wary of willpower and oh gosh, the thing has slipped my mind already. Yeah, maybe it'll come back. Um, yeah, maybe something like just really valuing rest. Um, oh goodness, it was such a good thought too.
Oh,
It's all right. Yeah, I mean, so what is the role of willpower for you around this habit? Well, establishing this routine.
it's probably there subconsciously. Um,
Are you making yourself get up in the mornings and or having this practice routine in the mornings?
I think some days it definitely feels like I'm trying to just make myself get up.
Yeah.
I find if I have something or like somewhere to go first thing in the morning or something to be awake for, it's easier to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, but not necessarily easier as in I have to get out of bed to go to this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it feels easier, like I'm more excited
Yeah.
to get out of bed.
Right, right. All right. So I remember the other thing. So the other thing is that it's connected to like your energy levels are connected to everything in your life. Um, and the replacement for willpower is having things that you actually like, things that actually feel good to you, things actually you look forward to. So where willpower fails is that we don't have very much of it, and um, if you're trying to make yourself do something that's not fun or not enjoyable or meaningful in some way, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, I don't necessarily hear you setting yourself up for failure here. It sounds like you have time in the mornings, and this is something that you enjoy doing, watering your plants and playing some violin. Um, but maybe there, the one thing that came up for me was that where you said there's a challenge is around this voice that says no, stay in bed.
It sounds pretty much like that too.
um, yeah. So, I mean, do you have a good sense of how much sleep your body needs?
I think so. I think usually 8 to 9 hours
Hmm.
usually feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so are you getting that consistently?
I have the past 2 days. I know that for sure. 'Cause
I
that's when I started this. Um,
see.
and then the first 2 days of the year, I got probably a lot more than that amount of sleep.
Okay. All right. I didn't realize that. Okay. So, all right. Well, yeah. So as you go about establishing this routine, so the thing to really pay attention to is, are you trying to impose a routine because you think that you should, or can this be something more like an organic outgrowth of your life as it is? Does it suit the other? Does it suit your proclivities, personality, natural rhythms, things that you already have going on in your life? If it suits all those things, it's going to be easy to keep this routine in place. And the only willpower you'll need is in remembering, oh yeah, this is what I want. If something else comes up, like, oh, a 10-hour TV marathon, I just really wanted to watch all the way to the end. It's like, okay, maybe I can let go of that. So that might be the use of willpower. Um, that works because it's remembering, like, getting back to what actually works for you, what you actually want. And it's not like I should get up in the morning because then I'm a good person. I remember hearing this guy Jocko Willink, who's this uh, ex-Navy SEAL. He's kind of a thought leader these days, and people really like him because he talks about willpower a lot. And he talks about like getting up at 4 in the morning and like doing your exercise routine, and it just sounds horrible.
Yeah.
People are asking him like, how do you develop grit and willpower? He says, you just do it. And it's more nuanced than that. What are you talking about? But still, that's to me an expression of the war against the self. This idea that the self is bad or somehow inherently deficient and needs to be fixed through the use of willpower or some kind of force or control. And it's the same thing with diets. The reason diets don't stick for people is because the underlying feelings, proclivities, lifestyle hasn't changed. If those things do change, then you lose weight like that. You keep it off. So, how does all that land with you? Does what do you what's coming up for you?
Yeah. And I did just read this fairly recently in the book that you're writing.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with it. You can't, there's nothing inherently wrong or broken about what you're doing or you as a person. But it's more so like instead of trying to fix something, um, more so just going and changing something without really disrupting yourself, if
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Because you have natural rhythms, and so this moment of waking up, getting out of bed, it sounds like a transition point between the very real, beautiful need and desire for rest and sleep, and you're really busy. The way you describe your schedule, especially with the past fall, with all the students and all the gigs you're doing, it's like, yeah, you're gonna need more sleep. You're gonna need more rest, and maybe right now, excuse me, maybe right now is a time when you get to have more of that because maybe your schedule is less, so you can just give it to yourself. It's like, yeah, rest, lay in bed. It's okay. And then once you've had enough of that, you'll know you had enough of that when there's that feeling like, oh yeah, I really want to play right now. I really want to play play my violin right now, or I want to see those plants, right? And so there's some energy, some real desire that comes organically, or like, the bed doesn't feel so good right now, getting a little sore, a little achy just from lying too long. So that's like a real thing to respond to, as opposed to, oh, I have this idea that I've been in bed too long, but it still feels really good, and I don't really have anything else going on, but I have this idea that I should get up. You know, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Just notice as you go
Yeah.
about this routine, this new routine. Just notice, and you don't have to like try to. If you notice yourself trying to exert willpower or something like that, you don't have to even try to change it. Just like you just place your attention on it. Like, oh, there's that thing. Oh, there's that thing again.
Mhm.
That by itself can begin to make a change. Okay, good. Um, yeah, all right. So you had this other question around quantity versus quality in terms of playing. It reminds me of a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte, who said that sometimes quantity has a quality all of its own. Yeah, of course, he was the general, who took most of France's young men into battle. um, okay, so yeah, so again, like what comes up for me is, are there good reasons why you might choose to play, or like, yeah, play more gigs than you might be able to thoroughly practice for? Let's put it that way. Are there good reasons for that?
There's So I'm gonna kind of contradict myself for a second,
Yeah.
but the by accepting more gigs, you obviously you get paid more, so you can sustain yourself, and then also you're meeting new people.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting more experience playing different pieces of music,
Mm-hmm.
and usually my gigs are in all different directions, so I'll be networking and meeting people in all different directions.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a fine line there where if I start taking way too many, where I'll show up sight reading, which that would be very bad. I haven't done that. But if you show up sight reading, then that's not going to look good on your part, and um, either looking professional or just meeting more musicians and that kind of thing. So it's like a fine line, and I'm still trying to find. I guess maybe not try to find the fine line, um, but not step so close to it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. This goes pretty deep into how our, uh, well, at least where my mind goes is, there is something about our civilization, our society, the way that our money system works, that pits our love against our survival. So, like there might be. It sounds like that. I mean, there is for me. So there might be a part of you that like would love to just be able to practice really thoroughly and really get to know the pieces before you perform them, and to enjoy that experience of really knowing your shit and being able to go out on stage and say, here I am, I know my stuff. And doesn't it sound great? Is there a part of you like that?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There is for all of us. Like there's this sense of like having a gift, and it's just like, here's me, here I am, I'm great, and look at me, look at what I could do. And it's not like selfish in the sort of pejorative sense. It's like you are a gift, and you have gifts, and it feels good to give your gifts well. It just feels good to do that. And there's there's just something about our money system that sort of disallows that, where you make more money, the less like yeah, the less work you put in, or if you put in the minimum, let's say, then you get more money. If you put in the bare minimum for lots of gigs, then you're getting paid for all those gigs. And this is the way it is for really any job. Even being in school, you can put in the bare minimum to get the grade. Or even if you have a salaried position, in some sense it makes sense to just put in what you need to do in order to not get fired. But that's not very satisfying.
Right.
um so I could talk about some of the deeper reasons for that, but maybe just we can just say that, given that this is sort of the way things are for now, like how do we deal with this? How do we find something more meaningful, a meaningful and sustainable way of making a living as a musician in this scenario that we find ourselves in? So the first thing is just to realize that there's something sort of inherently depleting about the sort of transactional nature of work that we have. So there's a whole other model, based on the idea of gift economy, um, where I give gifts to you or other people, just my labor or my presence, whatever it might be, and somehow or another, I get that back over time. And there's a sense of being more connected to the people around you, and the sense of like being able to just freely give and knowing that somehow you're supported, right? So we don't live in a gift economy. We live in a transactional economy. When I do the thing, I get paid. Transaction done. Right? So it kind of cuts off human connection. Right? So just to know that this is the system we live in, and this system of transaction, it's very powerful. It's built the civilization that we see, but it has this sort of cutting off of human connection built in. So just to know, like, okay, we're already at a disadvantage as far as that desire to give gifts, our gifts. So from that point of view, it's kind of up to us to carve out or approach these decisions as best we can, knowing that we're already like the slope is against us, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, you're already thinking about some of these things. You don't want to like overly tire yourself, and at the same time, you do want to be able to make a living. And it's just like these two things are going at cross purposes. So what then might be the thing to pay attention to? What might be like the parameter of success, let's say? How would you know that you've gone too far in terms of taking work?
The first thing that comes to mind, and again, doesn't fully answer the question, but anytime I get, say, an email or a text or something asking if I'm available for whatever gig, to instead of just immediately check my calendar, oh, I'm not doing anything that day, yeah, and respond like, yeah, I'll do it. Think about it a little bit more, like kind of look not just at that day, but what's going on that week,
Right.
or if there's anything else coming up that I know I'll have to put a lot of energy in preparing for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe even if the gig just sounds worth it by itself, like if it's something that would be fulfilling, or if it's
Yeah.
not great.
Yeah. 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 And so how would you know the difference? Like at an embodied level.
Yeah,
This
that's the
gig.
part of the question.
Right, right. So this is the real key to the whole thing, I think. How do you know at an embodied level whether or not a gig is worth it? Like because like just thinking about things conceptually doesn't always give us the right direction. Having an intellectual understanding, oh, well, I do actually have these 24 hours where I don't do anything. Um, so it kind of makes sense to try to fit this in. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But we can't always rely on our intellect to help us make satisfying decisions, help us not get overworked, help us find meaningful work. What are you going to rely on instead?
It's just what you want, or like your kind of
Yeah.
general
Mm-hmm.
feeling
Mm-hmm.
towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. And where does that feeling reside? How do you know?
I know this one. It's
We've talked about this.
yeah, we talked about this sometime before. But
Similar.
thinking more with like your heart instead of your head, and what you want and what your initial reaction is at it, like the emotion and reaction you get. Say again, like if I get an email, if I look at it and I get excited initially versus cringe at it, uh, that would definitely tell me something different.
Yes. Yes. Right. So it's the same thing with playing from the heart. This is what we've talked about in the past. You know, we listen to the inner audience member,
Right.
right? Your heart, your gut, your embodied response, your embodied emotional response. This is what brings music alive. This is also what can tell you uh, whether or not you should do this gig. Sometimes, yeah. So one thing is just to trust that there's wisdom there. And it can be hard to trust because in our culture, we are taught from an early age to mistrust our feelings. You just do the work. Doesn't matter if you feel like it or not. Just sit down and do your homework. Play happens later. You know, so what the things that you feel like doing are dismissed, and we're constantly taught to force ourselves to ignore the inner audience member to get things right. And so it can take time to learn to trust this again. Depends on your own experience in your life, how long that will take, or maybe you already do have some trust. I'm sure you do. Um, but yeah, just to be even just to begin to listen here, like, oh, should I take this gig? Heart says, eh. Right? You just notice that, right? And if you're getting a lot of from gigs, it might mean that you got too much on your plate,
Mhm.
or maybe the gig somehow, it could even be like a really great paying gig with great connections potentially, but if something in your heart is saying, you might listen to that
Mm.
because there's intelligence in that. I, we our bodies are not just 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old. Our bodies come from 3.5 billion years of evolutionary history. There's a lot of wisdom in our bodies. So there might be something about even like really cool gig that looks really cool on paper, but your heart's saying no. There might be something about that which some pattern recognition part of you recognizes as mm-mm. But even intellectually, like, oh, it's going to pay really well, and oh, there might be good networking opportunities. um, so you can just notice these different parts of yourself. One thing that I hear from people who study this kind of material, this kind of stuff that I'm talking about, is like the more you listen to your heart and gut, the better things go, because you're not going to find yourself in situations that don't really suit you. How does that land with you?
Yeah, I definitely, next time you get an email or something, to take the time and at least kind of feel out if I actually want the gig or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this thing about money is so important. The anxiety that we feel around money is real. We live in a we don't have like a social safety net really.
It's like for me personally, I have to remind myself often, like, I am financially okay. Like, I'm not
Great.
like barely making it from week to week.
Yeah,
I think the biggest thing is that looms over um, is always student loans, because you just see this big number. You're like, well, I gotta pay them off eventually, and it's just like always kind of staring at you.
yeah,
So yeah, and I know it's all going to work out, and as long as I remind myself of that, I'm fine. But it's easy at times, like you said, just to naturally kind of get caught up or get stressed about it.
yeah, yeah. There's something about anxiety like that that um, sometimes anxiety stays with us because that part of us that's feeling anxious isn't is seeing something real, or maybe saw something real in the past and just hasn't been updated.
Mm.
I notice this all the time. It's like this sort of free floating anxiety, and sometimes around money, I have to remind myself. I have to actually like sit down with myself and say, okay, I actually do have plenty of money right now. I could meet all my needs, no problem. And I got money coming in next month too. And just again, just noticing that, just notice that, see, just like letting that information in. It takes time. It takes like really sitting with it. Like, oh yeah, I really am okay. I really am okay. I really can take care of myself. Even if I run out of money, I can take care of myself. How does that land with you?
I agree with it. And what the last thing you just said, like even if you don't, you can't take care of it, or like you can't,
Even if you run out of money, you can take
yeah,
care
when
of
you run out of money, like I'm not like if say I run out of money, it's not like I'm gonna be living under a bridge somewhere.
you.
Like I know I still have family and everything, so worst comes to worst, it's still I'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can take this even more to an extreme. Maybe we'll wrap up here after this. But even if you were living under a bridge, there would be a way in which you're still okay. You'd be
Mhm.
uncomfortable. It wouldn't be what you wanted for your life, probably. But there would be a way in which you're still okay. You still look after yourself. Um, Again, not ideal, not as safe, not as comfortable, probably not very fun. But you still have like this sort of basic sense of like okayness. You could still have that. Okay. Was any of this helpful for you?
Yes.
Good. What was most helpful for you today?
Oh man, how do we even like I feel like I have all these ideas or thoughts in my mind, but it's hard to just kind of you can't it's not one of those things that you could just list off, you know.
Okay. Well,
Um
maybe just
but
name what you're feeling. Just any
I
emotions
feel
that
more
rise up.
relaxed now, like more at ease, more
Okay. Great.
content. Um, I guess just knowing, or even just the act of like reminding myself now of like everything's okay. You have the freedom to choose if you want to do a gig or not. Like you can actually take time and listen to yourself. You're not forced to take a gig for any
Yeah.
reason, and you're not forced to wake up early. Like you can listen to yourself
That's right.
and decide
That's
what
right.
would be best.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. You can listen to yourself, decide what would be best. Good. I get a good feeling from that. Yeah, and yet there is that part of me that mistrusts that too. That's in there. And I think it's in all of us that grow up in this so- society. That sense of mistrust. So, and again, it's not to push aside or try to make that mistrust go away, but simply to notice, hey, that's there. That's there too. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, good. Anything else?
This is a little thing. I started listening to what was it called? I think it's Headspace. It's a
Mm,
meditation app.
mm-hmm.
And the one last night, it I really like this example of or analogy of what just like acknowledging that you have a thought and then letting it go is it's like you're watching the clouds or you're looking at the sky. Like the blue sky is there. Like you don't have to make it. It's
Mm-hmm.
inherently there. Um, but you'll just occasionally you'll see a cloud. You're like, and you just watch it go by. The cloud being your thought.
Yeah.
And at times you can't see the blue sky if you have all these thoughts, but it's still there. It's
Yeah.
I just really liked. thinking of it that way.
Hmm. Yeah, and what is that? What is that? What's this blue sky
The
in
blue
your
sky is just kind of the entity of your mind. I don't remember exactly, but it's kind of like it's just
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
your the space in your mind, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like your mind is space. It's the space of consciousness and the visual field and bodily sensations, thoughts, feelings, everything that we know in life arises in this space. The space has no characteristics of its own, and yet it's there. And thoughts come up into this space and then disappear. And to notice the difference, or you know, how these sort of how a thought arises into this space, and then when the thought goes, the space is still there, can provide a great sense of peace. Because what is so, because thoughts can be really powerful, and we can get identified, all wrapped up in believing our thoughts to be true. And it's just an appearance. I mean, there's many layers. We could talk about this another time, but but noticing that background sense of space is what brings inner peace. We'll just leave it at that. And it's you. It's the essence of who you are. Is that space?
I think that's the word. I think they used essence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Very good. Um. All right. Well, I'll stop the recording now. Okay, thank you, Alyssa.
Yeah.